Shadowed Battlegrounds presents Teddy Roosevelt's legendary charge at San Juan Hill, a story of valor. The tropical sun hung high over the Cuban landscape on July 1st, 1898, casting harsh shadows on the dirt and grass of the battlefield. Theodore Roosevelt, clad in a rough khaki uniform and a wide-brimmed hat, sat astride his horse, Texas. The heat was oppressive, and the air was thick with tension and the scent of gunpowder. Before him lay the daunting slopes of San Juan Hill, a strategic position held by Spanish forces. Roosevelt could feel the weight of history pressing on his shoulders. He had always yearned for glory, to prove himself on the field of battle, and now that moment had arrived. Around him, the Rough Riders, a motley crew of cowboys, scholars, and adventurers, stood ready, their faces set with determination. "Men!" Roosevelt called out, his voice steady but filled with the fire of conviction. "The eyes of the world are upon us. This is our moment. We must take that hill or die trying. Remember the Maine, and with it, remember the honor of our nation." The men responded with a cheer, rifles raised high. They were outnumbered and facing well-entrenched Spanish troops. But Roosevelt's words had ignited a spark in their hearts. The command came down the line: advance. Roosevelt led from the front, his horse charging ahead as the Rough Riders followed on foot. The terrain was rough and unforgiving, the incline steep and covered with thorny underbrush. As they advanced, the crack of Spanish Mausers echoed across the hill, and bullets whizzed past, striking men down around him. But Roosevelt pressed on, urging Texas forward, his sword gleaming in the sun. Every step felt like a mile, and the air was filled with the cries of the wounded. Roosevelt's heart pounded in his chest, not out of fear, but from the sheer exhilaration of the charge. He had faced death before, but never on such a grand stage. He was in his element, a man of action, driven by the belief that this was his destiny. As they neared the crest of the hill, the Spanish fire intensified. Roosevelt dismounted, knowing that Texas was too large a target, and that his place was on the ground with his men. He drew his pistol and continued upward, shouting encouragement to those around him. "Don't stop, boys. We're almost there. Give 'em hell." The Rough Riders, inspired by their leader's bravery, pushed harder. Men fell, but the line did not break. Roosevelt found himself at the head of the charge, the summit of San Juan Hill, just yards away. He could see the Spanish soldiers scrambling to reload, their faces pale as they realized the Americans were upon them. With a final burst of energy, Roosevelt led his men over the top. The Rough Riders surged forward, overwhelming the Spanish defenses in brutal close combat. Roosevelt fired his pistol until it was empty, then grabbed a discarded rifle and continued the fight. The Spanish line crumbled before them, and the American flag was soon planted on the summit. The battle was won, but Roosevelt did not stop to celebrate. He looked down the other side of the hill, where more Spanish forces were entrenched. "We're not done yet, boys," he shouted, rallying his men for another assault. But the enemy was broken. The sight of the Rough Riders, now bolstered by other American units, sent the Spanish into a retreat. Roosevelt allowed himself a moment to catch his breath, sweat dripping down his face, and surveyed the battlefield. The charge had been costly, with many of his men lying still on the slope, but the victory was undeniable. The charge up San Juan Hill would become one of the most celebrated moments of the Spanish-American War, a symbol of American courage and determination. And for Roosevelt, it was a personal triumph, a defining moment that would catapult him into national fame and eventually the presidency. As he stood on the crest of the hill, the stars and stripes fluttering in the breeze above him, Roosevelt knew that this was just the beginning. He had proven himself in battle, but there were still many battles ahead, both on and off of the battlefield, and he would face them all with the same indomitable spirit that had carried him to victory this day. The Rough Riders gathered around him, their cheers ringing out across the hilltop. Roosevelt smiled, tipping his hat to the men who had fought so bravely by his side. "You did well, boys," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You did your country proud. If you like this story and want to see more, click on the icon top left. If you want to help support our channel, please hit the subscribe button on the top right.